we all want to know how to grow huge platforms, right? How to reach more people, how to have a bigger impact, right? How to drive more traffic, et cetera, right? And when we think about a podcast, we're like, hey, this sounds great. I can, create some content solo. I can interview some people, right? I can reach even more people in different ways, audio only, right? Like I'm going to launch a podcast and I want to have this huge show that reaches, thousands and thousands of people and it's going to be great, right? So you head down this path and you're like, man, this is a grind, right? Like I'm maybe not seeing the downloads I want to see, not seeing the subscribers I want to see, and all the focus is on how do I grow a bigger and bigger podcast, right? We all see them, right? Lewis Howes, one of our clients, right? School of Greatness, huge podcast, right? Makes tons of money, from ad affiliate type revenue models on the back end of that when you get to those levels, right? But the reality is that it takes a long time to get to that level. Lewis has been at this for 10 plus years, right? So the big question is like, all right, well, we want to aspire to that. We want to build towards bigger and bigger guests. We want to kind of build towards bigger and bigger downloads and subscribers, et cetera, right? We want to do all that. But the big question is maybe instead of focusing so much on that, right? Because that's going to take some time. And we all know that most of us are pretty impatient, especially nowadays. The question is, how do we drive revenue? How do we see ROI? How do we see some kind of positive impact on our brand and our business in the short term from a podcast as we build towards something like that? And so that's what I want to dive into today. And this really came from inspiration from a recent coaching session with a client where really she's been at it for a couple of years now, I think 200 episodes and, doing a lot of great work, and was just like, man, we're not seeing kind of the platform growth that we were hoping to see. Like, what do we do to get bigger guests, et cetera, all the stuff we talked about. And I was like, well, maybe we need to just reorient, right? Like kind of, change our perspective a little bit about how we're looking at this podcast. What's the role of it? Like, how can we still strive towards some of those things, but see some like quicker, ROI in the short term now. So what I want to talk to you about today are some keys. I think there's going to be about 3, but we'll ultimately see how it plays out. But some keys to really drive ROI from your podcast in the short term while you are, ultimately building the bigger platform. And so let's take a look at what this might look like. Let's say this is you over here, right? You are the host. The chicken scratch, I know it's bad. So you're the host. We've got this great megaphone, right, or funnel, whatever you want to look at. Like you have your podcast. So, all right, /show, right? Podcast /show. All right, we're trying to reach all these thousands and thousands of people. It's great. Like it's just going to take a little bit of time. So what are these keys, right? What are the, and we want to kind of be getting on bigger and bigger guests, right? Coming on the show, reaching more and more people. Like we want to do that. And there's a whole process to kind of like continue to build up and kind of help those guests out and then hope that they help you out, et cetera, right? So there's a process that, you need to follow to continue to expand, the size of the platform over and over time. But again, what we're saying is like, while we're down here, right, as we're building up towards that, what are we doing in the interim? All right. And so if you haven't done this yet, this is critical, and everything else kind of falls off if you don't do this. So I'm going to remind you of kind of this. Key number 1 is, the positioning of your podcast. So it's like, who is, what is the info I'm sharing. Like what is the purpose of this show? We're going to be known for providing information that helps people X with us, right? How to build an influential personal brand. You tune into our show, we're sharing insights, expertise from ourselves and guests on how to build an influential personal brand. So your show, your podcast is going to be a source of information on what are you teaching people on? You're promising to deliver something, right? And then naturally you want to say like who is listening, right? Who are these people? Ideally, right? Those are your ideal client, right? Those are, people that the more they know you by tuning into your show, the more they trust you from consuming this content and all this great stuff, they're going to be more likely to want to kind of click through based on, kind of like what you're offering, the ad segments or whatever in the show, right? And then what are we selling? What's the monetization strategy or some other key things that really drive the show? Those are very basic. There's a whole kind of like blueprint on how to launch, kind of a killer podcast. But those are some fundamental things that if you don't have that right, everything else is going to break down, because we're really looking at this show as being a platform builder, a traffic generator to drive traffic back to whatever we're selling on the back end. Keep in mind, okay? Because the point where you get so big that you have enough people out here where you're able to monetize through ad and affiliate revenue, like Lewis and a lot of these other big time, show hosts, it's going to be a minute. So if you don't have our short-term, even mid-term monetization strategy figured out, then you kind of have a flawed strategy from the get-go, unless you just got tons of money and you're good to just kind of buckle up, and grind it for the long haul. So that's the first thing, is you have to have your core positioning and the core strategy around your show tight. Okay. And that's kind of a given. So hopefully, just hang with me. But the second biggest thing is that rather than is kind of looking at who are the guests. So second thing is, who are these people we're funneling to bring on? Now, it is good to think about them as people that, the critical first thing when it comes to your guests, we'll call it 2A, is, are they aligned with your positioning and bringing value to your audience, right? So if these people, these guests, we'll call them, down here, we'll call them guests, right? Those people you're bringing on obviously need to be aligned with your positioning, need to be people that are furthering and bringing value add information into the fold as you distribute it out to your audience. Otherwise, the whole kind of premise behind the show and everything that's kind of fueling it starts to break down. People can't understand that this is a consistent set of information coming that keeps them wanting to tune in to get what they were expecting. So that's kind of a given that 2A, they need to be guests that are aligned. But 2B, right, or we'll call it this key number 3, right? And this is really kind of the X factor that I want to make sure you understand, is that in the short term, right, the unique thing about doing a show, doing a podcast, is that these guests, in addition to being value add, kind of to your audience and sharing valuable insights, right, to just service the listeners, can and ideally should be prospects for your back end service offerings, right? And so you can create solo content all day, but this unique aspect of a show, of a podcast, is that you're bringing in guests. And when those guests can not only bring value to your audience, but are also prospective buyers for your back-end services, this is a creative way to just start networking with people that, may or may not, ultimately be interested in doing business with you through your back-end kind of product and service offerings. And so this is really the key thing, is if you don't really look at your show, and we'll kind of put the guest with the potential to buy as kind of like this critical third thing. So I'm going to stop this share for a second. So that's kind of the key thing I want you to wrap your head around is, yeah, it's good to build towards kind of the bigger platforms, the bigger guests, you know, the more downloads, the more subscribers, et cetera, right? And you're going to do it, and it's just going to take time. But in the short term, right, and even kind of looking long term, you need to make sure that we're using the podcast, the show, as a networking mechanism, as a business development tool. Looking at your guests as being great. Yes, they're aligned. That's a got to be a given. They're going to bring value to the audience in an aligned and on brand way. But also, if I got to know this person, right, if I got to know them, created this opportunity for them to get some exposure, right, that's going to help me start building a relationship with somebody that, one, may be interested in working with me based on what I'm selling on the back end, but two, and or, right, may know somebody that is a potential buyer of my back end services and can refer me, right, to other prospects. And so that's how you fuel good content out to your community to continue to just pump value add info and build your podcast and your platform and your listener base, while at the same time being able to extract revenue in the short term by doing strategic networking, strategic business development. So really, the key exercise here, the key action items for you are saying like, all right, can I position my show in a way where I'm known for this, right? I'm bringing in strategic people that complement my knowledge, right? As we collectively share valuable information out into the community, right? That's going to build platform. That's going to drive traffic. But also by getting to know these guests, they're either going to buy or they're going to be able to refer me to people that may buy as well. And so it's a creative way, again, to kind of build some strategic relationships, some strategic partnerships that drive short-term revenue growth while you're building towards some of the longer-term revenue opportunities. So again, don't be all consumed with how many subscribers, how many downloads, how do I get bigger and bigger guests? Maybe take a look at how do I get more strategic guests, because they may be already on your contact list. They may already be in your community where, and we would call that like low hanging fruit. So focus on that in addition to continuing to kind of work your way up to bigger guests. And that's where you'll be able to see some kind of more valuable short-term financial gains from your shows while you continue to build towards longer kind of bigger platform impact as well.